Welcome to When Gen X Ruled the Multiplex, the films that shaped the MTV generation. Frank Herbert's 1965 sci-fi classic Dune was first made into a film in 1984, when director David Lynch tackled it from a screenplay he adapted from Herbert's book. Prior to Lynch's involvement, filmmaker Alejandro Jodorowsky repeatedly tried to make a big-screen version of Dune throughout the 1970s and was eventually forced to give up. His unsuccessful attempts to film Dune became the subject of an acclaimed 2013 documentary. In 1979, Ridley Scott began work on his own version of Dune, but eventually backed away from it to make Blade Runner. At that point, David Lynch, then known for Eraserhead and The Elephant Man, entered the picture. He famously turned down the chance to direct Return of the Jedi to make Dune. Dune is a rip-roaring novel told in very cinematic language, and when you read it, you easily see why so many directors have dreamed of filming it. But it is also often considered unfilmable because it is long and complex with a huge cast of characters living in a far-off future in a cold and complicated universe. While Lynch's Dune ended up being gorgeous and fascinating and in many ways remarkable, it's also considered one of the biggest critical and commercial failures of the 80s. Speaking directly to viewers, the Princess Irulan, the daughter of the Emperor of the Known Universe, tells us the year is 10-191. The spice melange, known simply as the spice, extends life and expands consciousness and is the most important substance in the universe. You can fold space with it and travel to any part of the universe. It's only found on the hostile desert planet Arrakis, also known as Dune, which is populated by a people known as the Fremen. Princess Irulan is played by Virginia Madsen, known for films like Electric Dreams and Candyman. We see a graphic of the 4 planets most closely linked to the production and distribution of spice. Arrakis, Caladan, which is ruled by the House Atreides, Giedi Prime, which is ruled by the House Harkonnen, and Kaitain, home of the Emperor of the Known Universe. If you've never seen Dune, you are probably already starting to sense why this film repelled audiences looking for a fun popcorn sci-fi flick, because it opens with a dense lecture about a complicated fictional universe, complete with infographics. On Kaitain, the Emperor of the Known Universe meets with Edric the Guild Navigator, who can use the spice to fold space and guide spaceships across the universe. The Emperor wants to neutralize the growing power of House Atreides by putting Duke Leto Atreides in charge of Arrakis, knowing the current occupying force, House Harkonnen, will retaliate and wipe them out. The Guild Navigator, who has mutated into a grotesque creature living in a tank filled with spice-infused gas, has precognitive abilities. He warns the Emperor that Paul Atreides, the young son of Duke Leto, will cause problems for the Emperor down the line and thus should be killed. The Emperor of the Known Universe is played by screen legend Jose Ferrer. He's accompanied by the Reverend Mother, played by Welsh actress Sian Phillips. The Reverend Mother is a powerful member of the Bene Gesserit, an all-female sect with supernatural abilities. On Caladan, we meet Paul, the son of the leader of House Atreides, Duke Leto. Paul is played by Twin Peaks star Kyle MacLachlan, whom we've already seen in David Lynch's Blue Velvet. Dune was MacLachlan's film debut. Paul is visited by a trio of his father's closest advisors. The physician Dr. Yui, played by Dean Stockwell, whom we have also already seen in Blue Velvet, as well as The Legend of Billie Jean. Gurney, a skilled warrior/musician who is played by Star Trek The Next Generation's Patrick Stewart, and Thufir, a skilled tactician with a brain like a computer, played by Freddie Jones. The Atreides family is preparing to leave Caladan for Arrakis, where they will replace House Harkonnen at the Emperor's request. We also meet the man with the greatest name in the entire Dune universe, Duncan Idaho, who will leave Caladan first to establish good relationships with a Fremen on Arrakis. Duncan Idaho is played by Richard Jordan, whom we have seen in Solar Babies. Paul meets with his father, Duke Leto, played by German actor Jürgen Prochnow, known for Das Boot and Beverly Hills Cop 2. Paul's mother, the Duke's concubine Lady Jessica, played by English actress Francesca Annis, is a member of the Bene Gesserit. Jessica and the Reverend Mother wake Paul in the middle of the night to force him to undergo a painful and potentially deadly test of his willpower. Paul passes the test, suggesting he will fulfill a prophecy about a man with the powers of the Bene Gesserit who will lead the Fremen and control the spice. On planet Giedi Prime, home of the evil House Harkonnen, strategist Piter, played by perennial bad guy Brad Dourif, whom we have seen in Blue Velvet, briefs the bloated and villainous Baron Harkonnen, played by Kenneth McMillan, on what's going on with House Atreides. We also meet the captain of the guard, Nephid, played by Twin Peaks star Jack Nance, who also appeared in Blue Velvet. Look, pretty much the entire cast of Blue Velvet pops up in Dune. And we meet the Baron's 2 evil nephews, the Beast Raban, played by Paul L. Smith, who was Bluto in the 1980 Robin Williams Popeye film, and Fade, who is played by English rock star Sting. As a Gen Xer who was 10 years old in 1984, the detail about Dune that I was most keenly aware of pre-release is that Sting was in it. The Baron, who is covered with pus-filled blisters, floats around the air in his inflatable suit. Just in case you weren't sure whether he's a villain, he sexually assaults and brutally murders a young servant. Jessica, the Duke, Paul, and their adorable pug dog arrive on Arrakis to take control of the planet. The Duke meets up with Duncan Idaho, who has befriended the Fremen and believes they will be excellent allies. We also meet Imperial planetologist Dr. Kynes, played by Swedish film legend Max von Sydow, who teaches Paul and the Duke how to survive on Arrakis. Paul, the Duke, Kynes, and Gurney visit the surface of Arrakis to inspect the spice production. They narrowly avoid being killed in an act of lethal sabotage by House Harkonnen. We get a quick cameo by David Lynch as a spice worker. We meet the Shadow Mapes, the Fremen housekeeper of House Atreides' palace on Arrakis, who is played by Linda Hunt, Oscar winner for The Year of Living Dangerously. The spice melange has many benefits, including extending life and awakening supernatural abilities. Prolonged exposure to spice will turn eyes an eerie glowing blue. When Paul first samples the spice, he undergoes hallucinations, suggesting he is the Messiah as foretold in Bene Gesserit prophecies. He's ambushed in his bedroom by a Harkonnen trap, but he outwits it thanks to his extensive training, and also saves the Shadow Mapes. Because the Baron is holding his wife hostage, Dr. Yui sabotages the shields and allows the Harkonnen forces to invade the Atreides stronghold. The Shadow Mapes is murdered, and Duke Leto is captured. Dr. Yui gives Duke Leto a false tooth equipped with poison gas, and urges him to use it to kill both himself and the Baron. And then we get a slew of major character deaths. Dr. Yui is murdered by the Baron, Duke Leto kills himself and Piter with the poison tooth, and the Beast Raban kills Dr. Kynes by stranding him on the surface of Arrakis without any protection. Jessica and Paul are captured by the Harkonnen. Duncan Idaho tries to come to their rescue and is killed. Jessica and Paul are taken into the desert to be left to die, but Jessica uses her Bene Gesserit powers to encourage their captors to kill each other. On the surface of Arrakis, Jessica and Paul are menaced by a giant deadly sandworm. They find shelter in a cave where they meet Stilgar, the leader of the Fremen, who is played by Kyle MacLachlan's Twin Peaks co-star Everett McGill. Paul falls in love with a beautiful young Fremen woman named Shani, played by Blade Runner's Sean Young, whom he has seen in visions. The Baron orders the Beast Raban to attack Arrakis and take away all the spice. During all this, a greased-down Fade wanders around in cool blue metal underwear for no particular reason other than to get viewers into the theater. It did not work. This film bombed at the box office. But A++ for effort, Sting. The Fremen have their own Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother, played by Silvano Mangiano, wife of this film's producer Dino De Laurentiis, and grandmother of TV host and cookbook author Giada De Laurentiis. The Reverend Mother is on the brink of death. To see if she's worthy of becoming her successor, Jessica drinks the ironically named Water of Life, which is a terribly lethal poison. Jessica survives the poison and becomes the new Reverend Mother. The poison causes Jessica's unborn daughter to be born prematurely, and baby Alia comes out of the womb with the full powers of a Reverend Mother. Meanwhile, Fade and the Baron force a captive Thufir to work for them in a very confusing scene that involves milking a cat. Time passes. Paul and Shani fall in love, and Paul commands the Fremen to bring a halt to spice production, which will cause a crisis throughout the universe and grab the attention of the Emperor. The Fremen test Paul's mettle by having him fight one of the sandworms. Paul tames the worm and rides astride it while some totally awesome power chords play in the background, and this is probably a good time to point out that, with the exception of one theme composed by iconoclastic experimental musician Brian Eno, the score for Dune was composed by Toto. On Arrakis, Paul reunites with Gurney, who is shocked yet delighted to realize Paul and Jessica survived the massacre of House Atreides. Paul drinks the Water of Life and experiences mystical visions that show him that the sandworms are intrinsically connected to the spice. Amidst more power chords, the Emperor's fleet arrives on Arrakis. Displeased with the way House Harkonnen has mismanaged the crisis over spice production, the Emperor summons the Baron to show him the Beast Raban's decapitated head. Paul's sister Alia, who is now a toddler, played by Alicia Witt, known for Twin Peaks and the mid-90s sitcom Sybil, visits the Emperor and threatens him with ruin. Through Alia, the Emperor learns Paul is alive and is the leader of the Fremen. Having successfully instilled fear in the heart of the Emperor of the known universe, wee little Alia casually murders the Baron. War breaks out on the surface of Arrakis. Using his spice-granted abilities, Paul controls the sandworms, who prove to be a powerful ally. The Emperor's troops are outgunned, outmanned, outnumbered, and outplanned. Victorious, Paul confronts the Emperor and commands him to leave Arrakis. Fade faces off against Paul in a one-on-one duel, and Paul kills him. The film ends with a miraculous rainfall on the desert planet, as Paul is formally recognized as the leader of Dune. Dune was supposed to be a big hit. It was supposed to be the next Star Wars. My sister and her friends were super stoked about it, and they went to see a midnight showing of it on opening night, arriving early to stake out their place in line in Spokane, Washington in December of 1984. And they were the only people in the theater. Nobody saw this film because critical reviews and word of mouth were both terrible, and viewers were scared away, and all plans for sequels were scrapped. David Lynch was deeply unhappy with the way the film turned out. To this day, he still mentions in interviews that Dune is the film he regrets the most. He lost some creative battles with the studio and was forced to cut a great many scenes to get the runtime down to under a manageable 2.5 hours. But honestly, even if Lynch had been given free creative reign and an endless budget, this film was still going to be inaccessible to a huge chunk of viewers. Lynch's Dune was never going to be a big crowd pleaser like Star Wars. There's a reason the book is often described as unfilmable. To get his version of Frank Herbert's vision on screen, Lynch condensed all this plot, all this backstory, all these characters, down to their barest essences, and thus the film mostly failed to resonate with viewers. As one example, at one point in the film, Chani tells Paul very dramatically that he is her life and she will love him forever. And we just kind of have to take her word for it, because Chani and Paul have had very little screen time together. So much else is going on that what should be a sweeping romance at the heart of the story barely registers. We have to kind of remind ourselves who Chani is. The film has this phenomenal cast of interesting actors playing interesting characters, but most of them barely have time to register before exiting the film in a perfunctory manner. The single biggest misstep the film makes, though, is the heavy reliance on interior monologue. From start to finish, we constantly hear the inner thoughts of pretty much every single character, and it's the only element of the film I do not like. It's awkward, it's unnecessary, and worst of all, it makes it seem like Lynch doesn't trust viewers to understand the story by watching the visuals and listening to the dialogue, without also being told exactly what the characters are thinking at every moment. In a bid to avoid the problems Lynch encountered in trying to condense Herbert's big, sprawling book into a standard theatrical running time, in 2000, the Sci-Fi Channel turned Dune into a 3-part miniseries, which allowed the story to be told over a leisurely 4.5 hours. Director Denis Villeneuve's brand new theatrical version of Dune, in theaters right now, only covers the first half of the novel, with the concluding half to be filmed at some later date. Despite its missteps, I really do love David Lynch's Dune. Visually, it's often gorgeous, and it's wildly creative, and it's got this great epic story at its core. It had a healthy $40 million budget, and most of that money seems like it was pretty well spent. Yeah, some of the special effects haven't held up, but the set design and costumes are top-notch. This is a cold, dense, operatic film. It's deeply flawed, and it was never ever going to be a big crowd pleaser, but so much of what Lynch did is really exceptional. It's a deeply interesting failure, which is a far more noble beast than a bland success. Next time, bring on the killbots. I'm looking at the sci-fi horror favorite, Chopping Mall. Thank you for joining me, and I will meet you here later.